I'm a Midwesterner too. Actually, I'm back. And I've made you a co-host, Charles, so that you can let anyone in, because I'm putting this, we're going to be live on YouTube in just a second here.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
So I'm a Midwesterner. And then I'm going to tweet out the link as well. But I am actually from Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, very cool. Okay, Buckeye Country.
Buckeye Country. And I also know that, yes, we are overly nice, sometimes uncomfortably nice.
Yeah.
So because I now live in Washington, D.C., and I'm just now comfortable honking my horn because it's considered rude. And I do call it Coke or Pepsi and not pop anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, well, I think we're good. We're live. I've got it on and we can start. Thank you again, Ray. I'm going to welcome you to our class. This is Writing.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. It's November 25th, 2020. And we have guest speaker Ray Flores, who is a full-time announcer and play-by-play commentator. Have you done color, Ray?
Once or twice before, and that was just because I was needed to fill in that regard.
Got it. So you have the skill, but you mainly are announcing and play-by-play.
Yeah.
I love it. I think what we're going to learn is that you have to be nimble. You have to be adaptable and flexible, as we're going to learn. But you are, again, you are a commentator announcer for MMA and boxing promotions. So many. I have a few of them. I know I'm not getting them all. For the past 15 years, you worked for the numerous promotions, including ESPN Radio, that was in Chicago.
Yep.
Galavision, Telefutura, Combate Americas, which you did with fellow Writing and Fighting alum, who I'll mention my connection to Charles in a second. Premier Boxing Champions, which is, do you do announcing and play-by-play?
Yes, so that's my home now. Them and TGB Promotions, that's my home.
That's your home. All right. And they are on Fox, FS1. Are they also on?
Showtime.
And Showtime.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, this is your world.
Yeah.
I have to mention that you flew to 4 cities in 4 days to host the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather press tour in 2017. One of the biggest media events in recent combat history. I might even say of all combat history. My students, often they don't know as much about MMA and boxing, but they know about the May-Mac event. Oh gosh, what are they? They would have been 15 or 14 at the time. It gets sad because they're born in 2002 at this point, my students.
Wow.
Yes, I know.
I'm getting old.
I know, it blows my mind. Because especially when we talk about like the beginnings of UFC in 1993, that's for them considered so long. It's ancient. And also, I have to mention, you are breaking the ground as a role model for the Latinx community in the sports broadcasting world. And I want to talk to you about that, about kind of being Latino. And in this world, I've kind of talked to other panels. We have Julie Kedzie and Laura Sanko talking about being a broadcaster as a woman. And I'm just curious how it's been for you as a minority in the U.S. and kind of breaking that ground.
Well, once again, I want to thank you for the invitation to talk with you and your students. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Much thanks to my good friend, Charles DeGisco, who I think I've mentioned to you. I think he's going to be the future of being an analyst in MMA, and that's a fact because I know his skill set. But when it comes to your original question, I've had very good people before me. I love history when it comes to the fight business because we just didn't end up here in 2020. So I look at those who came before me on the ring announcing side, Michael Buffer, on the play-by-play side, Jim Lampley, the greatest of all time. When it comes to being Hispanic and being a part of the Latinx generation, I look at those who paved the way for me, the guys like Bernardo Osuna, the guys like Jaime Mota, the guys like even like Lupe Contreras, who's like 20 years older than me. But Bernardo and I and Jaime and I have a really strong connection with them because they are the ones who were doing, I worked with them on solo book sale towards the tail end of their career on solo book sale, but then they transitioned to Fox and to ESPN, and Bernardo's done a phenomenal job. And I always thank them for what they've done for the younger generation like me, because without those two guys being trailblazers, there would be no me in that regard. And the same thing with Jim Lampley, who his level of excellence and professionalism is just something that will never be touched. And that's a fact. It will never, ever be touched by anybody in this business. No disrespect to your students, but there's one Michael Jordan, and Jim Lampley is the Michael Jordan for combat sports announcers. And I have a very deep admiration for what he was able to do. But for me, it's about just moving forward and trying to open up more doors. I have a younger brother, Miguel, who I think Charles has known and worked with and stuff. And he is a ring announcer and does commentary with me on international events as well. And it's about, blowing open those doors for people like him, for people that are even younger, for your students to be able to say, hey, look, like things are easier for us because of what Ray was able to do. But things are easier for me because of what Bernardo and Jaime were able to do. So it would behoove me to continue to move forward and have just as much zest to work forward and move forward, because I can't drop the ball. They have literally given me the baton and said, okay, we are set in our ways and are doing well in our career. We laid the groundwork for you. So the struggles, the tribulations that they had to deal with, I don't have to deal with. And I want to make sure for the younger generation, the struggles and the tribulations I've had to deal with, that they don't have to deal with. And I would expect them to continue to have that same mindset, because it's about moving generations forward, not going backwards, not staying neutral. I'm Mexican, and like a Mexican boxer and like a Mexican fighter, I love to come forward. And it's all about that forward motion and that aggression that we have to have the mentality of in this business.
So well said, Ray. So well said. And I appreciate, and what you are doing, Tanisha Singleton, she's a friend of mine, a PhD in media psychology, and she has a kind of specialty in fandom. So she comes on my class often, and she would say, Ray, you are representation. And that is what is needed, because so many people see you in this position. And I love that you give so much regard to Lampley and these great people. And so I hope that we always, study the best, but you also are representing for a lot of people, and especially those in the Hispanic community, knowing that's possible. And also that you're doing great work, which I want to go into because, and Charles, please, I know Charles because he is an American University alum from DC. And so we met at a Cadezilla, a very a small, is it amateur?
Yeah, amateur promotion. Yeah.
And there was a lull in the fights, and I went up to him because he was the commentator. And we found out we both, I taught this class, writing and fighting. And he's been great because he's come to my class since I've been teaching since 2017. And what he helps me do is know what questions to ask, because I'm coming from a literature background.
Yeah.
And we're studying fiction, nonfiction, and cinema of combat sports, and looking at what techniques are involved and how it affects the audience. But then I have Charles because he's actually done it and know what it's really like to be out there. And especially, I really like to get into the process of commentating as well, because that fascinates me. I am a writer. I get to take a long time to put my thoughts together and edit it. And you guys have to be in the moment. So, so Charles, thank you. If you want to just tell everyone what you're up to now.
Yeah. So I want to add one thing real quick. Miguel, Ray's younger brother, actually does, I think, Ray, it's just announcing for Polaris, or does he do play-by-play as well?
He used to do announcing for Polaris because his schedule, he does a lot of the PBC shows now, or all of them.
Right.
So he wasn't able to get over there as much and stuff like that. But he did the announcing for them for a couple of years.
Right. I know. I used to watch him, and Of course, I'd recognize the guy. You know, it's amazing. But Polaris is the big jiu-jitsu competition they
Yeah.
have, mostly based in Europe, right, Ray?
Yeah, exactly. Out
I
of the
think
UK
England.
and stuff. Yep.
Can
Yeah,
I
the
ask you a
UK.
question? Why do you
Yeah.
guys come in brothers? Like the buffer? Like I'm thinking, do you have a brother, Charles, that I need to be aware of?
No, I have a sister who's very good at being loud and aggressive, but I don't think commentary is in her future. I'll tell you that much.
Got it. Well, I'm please continue.
But well, anyway, you know, so rather than talk too much about my career because it's in its infancy, I got my start with Ray. So on the very first show I ever commentated, I did color alongside Juliana Pena and Ray Flores, and that was when I really learned about what the play-by-play was all about, which now is what I do for Cowboy Fight Series. And you're really the quarterback. So if you look at it in football terms, he had a very good receiver in Juliana Pena, and he had a rookie in me who had never played it down before but seemed athletic. So he had to find ways to put me in positions for success. And also, more importantly, he had to find ways to dig me out of a hole if I accidentally talked into one. And a hole could be as simple as actually, one very case was I referred to the cage as the octagon. Now, the octagon is obviously a UFC term. And when I was working for Combate Americas, we referred to it as La Jaula, which is, I think, just the cage in Spanish, right?
Yep.
So basically, I was just like, oh, you know, right now, so and so is controlling the octagon, and Ray, without skipping a beat, just goes, "You're absolutely right, Charles. La Jaula, it's that he is there," and he just kept saying La Jaula to the point where anybody listening would have forgotten that I ever said octagon, right? And it was this professional way of not making me look like a Gugats who just made a big mistake, while simultaneously providing really good play-by-play on what's occurring, and you know, getting everybody involved in that actuality. So that was a really, I mean, honestly, one of the biggest experiences of my life. But being able to sit next to Ray as he kind of went through that, and then we trade notes. I still hit him up and bother him from time to time. It was terrific, and asking questions, and that's another one. I used to sit in before I did commentary for Combate. I was doing like operations and fighter relations, so I used to love sitting in on the fighter interviews. Obviously, I had a natural interest on the topic, so I got to hear how Ray would frame questions for people and kind of get them to talk a little bit more. So, I mean, God, the first time I was asking questions, it felt like I had been doing it for years. You know, the fighter interviews prior to commentary, right? You get kind of just ask some personal details so you have more to talk about to fill the time. And I got to kind of watch him go through that process and ask those questions and get a lot out of people who are normally pretty reserved, right? So it would be like me, Ray, and Adam Geller, the late Adam Geller, who helped get me my start. Rest in peace. Yeah, I mean, and he was terrific too. So he would ask these questions, and I'm in my head taking these notes, thinking like, "Oh wow, I didn't know that." So I was already going to school before I even started the class, so to speak.
Wow. But can we go back there then, Ray? Back actually further than that to how you got into this business, because I know it's so competitive. There are not many spaces, and I would love to know what brought you there, what was the interest, and then how you came to be where you are now.
Well, first of all, Charles is very kind and stuff. I love working with him, and him, the head of MLW Wrestling now, Cord Bauer, and the late Adam Geller. We'd always fly back on a red eye. I'll give you a quick story, and then I'll get into your question. Yeah. We would get in the car all the time because we all had red eyes, because we always had, like, Combate Americas was on a Thursday, and then I'd have a PBC show on a Saturday. Had to be there for Friday on the way in. So we'd all be on red eyes going home or going to the next city, you know, doing whatever. And the one thing that we talked about, even probably 3 or 4 shows before Charles got on, was we knew that, you know, we're pretty good with talent and understanding who has who loves the business, who doesn't, who's looking to do it just for a paycheck, who's just looking to do it for fame. Charles had a passion for it and still does, and even more so. And we knew, we're like, when he expressed interest in broadcasting, I'm like, you know what, this makes sense, because he would be operations, and even before he even mentioned it, he would be asking about, like, oh man, like, how do you do this or what, this and that. And we kind of talked even before, 2 or 3 shows before, we're like, man, if we can get him on as our color commentator, we know we're going to pop. Like, we're really going to take that show to the next level. And lo and behold, he got that opportunity, and he did a wonderful job. But to answer your question about how I got started, I was a big boxing fan too, as long as I can remember, like 2, 3 years old even. I mean, I have a really crazy memory, right? So I remember watching Julio Cesar Chavez beat Magic Taylor back in 1990, and Richard Steele with the call, and Lou Duva got on the apron and was kind of all upset and stuff like that. And Magic Taylor literally looked, if he would have taken one more shot, that he would have been, potentially hurt in significant fashion. But the fight was stopped with 1 second to go. And that was Chavez's big moment to be able to, get a victory and rip it from the jaws of defeat. I remember watching Mike Tyson lose to Buster Douglas at the Tokyo Dome, and watching Jim Lampley call it. How I got started in the business was, we have to go back to the WEC days. So if your students don't know, the WEC was an MMA promotion that focused on the lighter weight classes, 135, 145, 155. 55 was in the UFC, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. 35 and 45 were not. There was the WEC bantamweight champion of the world, Miguel Torres. Before Miguel went to the WEC, he's from East Chicago, Indiana. That's where I'm from. And I was doing local TV in Northwest Indiana for East Chicago Television, public access TV. And we did a piece on him. We did an interview with him about 10 or 15 minutes. So we spent the day with him training. This is before one of his fights when he was fighting locally in Northwest Indiana. And this is before regulation in MMA happened in Indiana and in Chicago. So we pretty much regulate ourselves. And I started following him around in late 2004. And then I saw him corner Stephan Bonnar on The Ultimate Fighter, the season finale #1, that I think it's the greatest MMA fight of all time because of the historical significance. And I think Dana White would attest to this. If it wasn't for Bonnar Griffin won, the UFC wouldn't be where it is today. That set the world on fire. But Miguel was the cornerman of Stephan Bonnar alongside the late Carlson Gracie Sr. So when I saw that, I called up Miguel. I'm like, hey, I know that you're going to be fighting in a few months. Do you mind if we come and call your fight? So he hooked me up with Monty Cox when they brought Super Brawl. If you remember Super Brawl used to be an MMA promotion in Hawaii only that would do big events. I mean, they had like Phil Baroni, they had Robbie Lawler. So many legends. I think Tim Sylvia fought there, but Super Brawl came to the United States, the mainland, for the only time. And Miguel Torres was on the co-main event. Jeff Curran fought Luke Spencer in the main event, but Miguel Torres fought, I forgot who he fought. And he fought in the co-main event. John Colossi, who fought in The Ultimate Fighter, was on that show. Spencer Fisher was on that show, who's an incredible fighter in the lightweight division. But thanks to Miguel, he introduced me to Monty Cox, and Monty allowed us to show the fight a week later on public access TV. I started following around Miguel, doing his local fights for a couple of years. Then he got to the WEC. Then I went to Columbia College in Chicago, and I'd always talk about fighting. One of my professors was like, why don't you do an MMA and boxing radio show? Combat sports is so visual. I'm like, how would that translate? But I'm like, one thing I always tell your students, unless it puts you in physical harm's way, never say no. If there's an opportunity or whatever, always say yes. Don't ask about especially early on in your career, don't ask about the dollar amount. Don't ask about nothing. You need experience. That is the first and foremost thing. That is, I would say, the highest level of what you need to understand is you need the experience. So I went ahead and I just started doing MMA and boxing radio shows for a couple of years. 6-7 months into it, a promoter by the name of Joe Goitia, who is a local Chicagoland promoter, called me up out of the blue and said, look, my ring announcer is going to be gone in 2 months. Do you want to be my ring announcer from now on? He goes, it pays $200 for a college student, $200 cash. Absolutely. I jumped on that. Then, another promoter, Mike Davis, called me up, and then I was starting, I was matchmaking fights for a local promoter in Northwest Indiana. And then I got into the boxing realm, and it just kind of built from there. And, I connected with Joe Martinez, who's still a great friend of mine, who is, an octagon announcer for the UFC. And at the time, he was doing a lot of WC events, and he started getting involved with the UFC. So he introduced me to Golden Boy and goes, you can be, he introduced me to them, and they had me as his replacement. So I started, my first show with Golden Boy was in December of 2011 on, Telefutura and Galavisión on Solo Boxeo. And I did that in 2011. I did that in 2012, got FS1 opportunities. And then I was doing Mayweather undercards off TV before Showtime went on the air. Then I connected with Artie Palullo, Banner Promotions. He was the first one to put me on ESPN. He was the one that gave me my HBO debut in April of 2015. And, I connected, it just built from there. And, that's a long story short. That's how I am where I am.
Wow. And so because HBO, you got in there before it ended then.
I did, yeah. Probably about 3 years before it ended, I made my HBO debut. And what was significant about that is that it was Ruslan Provodnikov, Lucas Matisse, and Turning Stone Resort Casino in upstate New York in Verona. And it was a split site. So typically Michael Buffer would do everything, right? Mm-hmm. But because it was a split site, Terrence Crawford fought, who did he fight? He fought Tomas Delorme in Dallas. And it was a split site. So Max Kellerman and Michael Buffer was the ring announcer for the Terrence Crawford fight because he was, really coming up at the time. Yeah. They had an opening ring announcer wise for the second doubleheader, which happened to be the second half of the doubleheader, which was in upstate New York. Lampley happened to be up in New York with me and work with Bernard Hopkins. So the reason why I tell you that story is in terms of your students, life comes full circle in this business. I grew up admiring Lampley, just like thinking he's the Michael Jordan, which he is. And for him to throw it to me in the ring was probably one of the most significant moments in my career.
Ah, that is great. No, and I love that you got to be and work with Lampley. Especially knowing because I'm from Columbus. You mentioned the Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson. That was one of the formative events in my childhood. I was 13, and my parents were watching it in the basement, and I heard them. And then Buster Douglas was from Columbus, Ohio. So when he beat Tyson, we were the hometown of the world heavyweight champion.
That's unbelievable.
For 9 months, but it really like it was so amazing and it's seared. Like I even remember what the couch looked like back then. It was and all this stuff. So, but in terms of bringing down, that is amazing because Lampley, like I watched that fight again, just start to finish, and it is. For us, it's just kind of music to your ears because they are filling in the emotion and the action. And that is great. So when did you do Combate with Charles then?
Probably 2016. I was with Combate during one of their first shows, which was, I think, even before Charles got on with the company. I think in 2014, 2015. And the reason why I got on with them, and one thing I will tell your students is always bring your best. It doesn't matter if it's 1,000 people, one person, 10 people, 10 million people, doesn't matter. Always bring your best. The guy that used to work at Golden Boy Promotions that's now involved with Premier Boxing Champions, Armando Gaitan, said, look, one of my buddies is a matchmaker for this MMA promotion. Would you be interested? And I go, absolutely, without even missing a beat. Again, as I tell your students, I didn't ask about, what's the money like, or what's this, or what's that. I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, television, let's go. So he referred me to them. And then I started doing their announcing in La Jaula, so to speak. So I was doing their announcing. And then I guess one of their guys understood that I had a passion for play-by-play. And I started really blossoming. I've been doing play-by-play since I was 17, but I got in as a ring announcer. So it's like, you got to be able to get in however you fit in. So I look at this business as I'm a jack of all trades. I'm a master of none. I never will be a master of any of them, because if you're a master of something, you feel like you cannot grow anymore. I always believe in going for the perfect broadcast, the perfect call. I'm always looking for perfection, and perfection in our business is something that is so abstract. It doesn't exist. But it's that pursuit of excellence and perfection that drives me every single day. So they realized that I had a passion for play-by-play then on the play-by-play standpoint. And then I probably did about 6 or 7 events before my schedule at PBC really got to be a lot more demanding, because I got in with PBC because of TGB Promotions. And again, it's one of those things. I'll give you a quick story financially. Yeah. I was doing a Mayweather Maidana undercard in Las Vegas, and I was off TV. When I started, there were probably 20 people in the MGM Grand Garden Arena. It didn't matter. I brought it like it was 20,000 people, sold out crowd, whatever. Someone taps me on the shoulder. It's one of the promoters and says, hey, what's your information? My boss, who happened to be Tom Brown, who is now, the promoter of TGB Promotions, he used to work with the late great Dan Goosen. Dan Goosen is a legend in boxing. So they go, hey, we love your voice. Do you want to come and, work with us and stuff? I'm like, yeah, I'm absolutely down. This is in May of 2014. I got a call from them in December, late November of 2014. They go, hey, we got an ESPN show coming up. We can't pay for your flight, but we'll pay you X amount, which was, well below what I was making. It's okay. And like, we'll pay for your food, whatever. I'm like, yeah, done. Like, I want to be able to get in with TGB Promotions, like done deal. So I flew myself, found a cheap flight on Southwest Airlines, made my way to Temecula, Pechanga Resort Casino, did about 6 or 7 hours we did like 3 or 4 hours on the air. I was on, ringing out for 6 or 7 hours. After the show was over, Tom Brown's wife, she was the one who found me, who heard my voice walking into the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Tom goes, what are you doing next week? I'm like, well, nothing. This is, a couple of days before Christmas. He goes, we're going to book your flight. You're going to be doing Showbox with us next week outside of Seattle. He goes, I'll see you next week. He goes, are you down? I'm like, absolutely. Because of them, I got in with Premier Boxing Champions because PBC was born in March of 15. And Tom has been the lead promoter for pretty much every single show since PBC has been born. And Tom and his sister, or his not sister, his daughter, Brittany Goosen Brown, have constantly fought for me, and they have me doing press conferences, grand arrivals. I mean, it's just been this ridiculous ripple effect. So that's why, long story short, that's why I am where I am.
Wow. It is like making sure you take advantage of the opportunities, because you never know when that opportunity is going to come in line with something, out of, that's extraordinary. Okay. So I have to ask you, Ray, you said that never say no unless there's something that might hurt you.
Put you in harm's way. So if you're having to go cover like the war and whatever, overseas and stuff, then I suggest you think about it before you're willing to do that. But that's why I kind of preface it. I'm like, oh, never say no unless it puts you in physical harm's way.
I was wondering if you were offered something, like, have you ever had to say no?
There was one show that I got offered to go to the Middle East when it was pretty turbulent. Mm-hmm. And I had to really think long and hard about it. And the show never happened, but I was like, well, like, here's this, what do I do? Like, I think the show is going to honestly be in Iraq. They're talking about doing a show in Iraq.
Oh,
so where, and I did, so.
Sorry. Where I don't know, like, you need a certain type of visa. It's I think the State Department does not want you traveling there. That is Ray's, like, then he'll say maybe no.
Yeah, and honestly, like, to be honest with you, Nancy, I called up, one of the first people I called my parents. I'm like, hey, this is what might be on the table. And they were like, well, you're not going to take it, right? I'm like, well, I'm thinking about it. And the reason why is because I love this business. Like, I love this business more than anything. Like, this is what drives me every single day. I want to be the best that I can be in the industry because the industry demands it. We've had people in front of us that have laid down that groundwork, and we need to take combat sports to that next level, because if not, then where is it going to go? And it's not just the fighters, it falls on us as commentators.
I love that. Now, you have to have the problem now, Ray, that you're a wanted commodity. Like, you have too many offers where it's just, it's physically impossible for you to be at two places at once.
I sometimes it happens that way, but I'm very fortunate because I have my younger brother who I work with and stuff. So it's like, I try to, and the way he's come up, he's kind of like learned under me, but he's his own entity and has worked very hard to grow and blossom into the position that he's in. But I come from a very traditional way of broadcasting because I learned from the masters, not only Jim Lampley, but Steve Albert and watching the greats. So I believe in tradition. I believe in following those and learning what the masters did for us. So I believe in hard work, constant preparation, being overly prepared, eating, sleeping, breathing this business to where it's in your veins. Like, that's the fact. So with my brother, he follows that same mindset. So if for some reason I have a conflict, I have to make sure, and people know, like, certain things take priority. I'll say, hey, I cannot do it, but do you want my brother to be able to do this? I'll give you a quick story. I was doing a PBC show in Miami a couple years ago, 3 years ago in December of 17. Tom Loeffler calls me up, or I got a call from somebody to give me to Tom Loeffler. He's the promoter for Gennady Golovkin, K2, et cetera, et cetera. They were doing an HBO Boxing After Dark show at the Mandalay Bay on a Saturday. They go, hey, can you come in and do the weigh-in and stuff like that? I go, I cannot do the weigh-in, but I'll tell you what I will do. My brother can handle the weigh-in. I will fly in on a red eye that morning to be able to handle the Boxing After Dark telecast, and my brother can do the undercards. They took it. And so my brother and I worked at the Mandalay Bay together 3 years ago, and he did the undercards and did HBO Latino, and I did the HBO Boxing After Dark telecast, again, working with the legendary Jim Lapley. So it's pretty awesome.
Wow. I love it that you've maximized your reach with your brother. The Flores, like, you know, you guys are now, I was going to say media mogul, or I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, we're not the Buffers. We're very far from it. But, you know, it's good to be able to handle our clients and take care of their needs and stuff because they give us opportunities.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So I would love to also now talk shop. Like, I'm fascinated. You know, I mean, announcing too. I'm very curious. You know, that obviously, like, how do you know if you could be a good announcer? Is it that
like ring announcer or play-by-play?
Ring it. Let's do a ring announcer first.
Okay.
Then we'll go into play-by-play because I'm
okay.
kind of pre-thinking or what you have to do to get involved. But no, announcing. All right, because we all watch it. I just watched the new Embattled movie that's out with Stephen Dorff. They had their announcer, and you know, there is kind of a cadence and tone. Now, is that something you've learned or trained? You know, and then obviously you can't mess up, but you can't be reading too much. It's this, you know. So tell me about being an announcer, because I'm fascinated.
Being an announcer is fun because, like, you're in the ring and, like, you know, I have such admiration and respect for these fighters, whether you're 50-0 like Floyd Mayweather or 0-50, men or women, it doesn't matter, because every single time they step into that ring or cage or octagon, they're risking their lives. I mean, that's the absolute fact. It is life or death in many instances. And I have so much respect and admiration. So it's up to me to give them the proper introduction. But with that, you have to do it within reason. You have to do it with a sense of class. You can't be a carnival barker. It can't be tacky. I believe that you have to look a certain way. I mean, that could be taken out of context, but what I mean by that is you have to look impeccable. I believe you should be in shape, because the athletes that you are getting ready to introduce are in the best shape possible. And I won't get to their level aesthetically, but I want to make sure that, you know, I look right and that I'm eating right and that I am so prepared to introduce them as they're getting ready to embark on this athletic battle. So when it comes to my voice, it's honestly, again, just trial and error and practicing and constant repetition. The thing is, the word that I would tell your students is repetition. Get as many reps in as possible. And there are more opportunities now on your own, even without in front of any people, because of YouTube, because of Instagram, because of Twitch, because of Twitter, everything. There's so many opportunities out there. And my first couple of shows, you know, God bless Joe Goitia and the early local promoters and the Bobby Hitzes of the world, because at the beginning I was terrible. And I firmly admit it, you know, I raised my hand and say, yeah, I was terrible. You know, I was moving around. I didn't know what style I was. What I would say is I learned from those that I admire. And then I kind of understand what my voice is, what fits for me, what's my pacing, what's my delivery. The one item that I cannot stand, and this is the biggest pet peeve of mine when it comes to ring announcers, is you have a card and they're constantly reading the card. So the camera's only on you for 10 or 15 seconds. You have to understand it. And another thing about this business, and we'll get into it a little bit later, is a feel thing. You know when the camera's on you, you kind of know when it's not on you. So when they go to ring announcers and they're reading a card, and they're like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to whatever. It's like, you can't memorize that. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you have your cards in your hand. Like, I don't believe in memorizing all the guys' informations, but when you're getting ready to say out of the blue corner, they're not focused on you anyway, because they're focused on the fighter as he's, you know, doing his warm up and stuff. But understand, know the building, know where you are. Like, have that type of preparation for the business. Too many times guys are hiding their face in front of whatever. I'm like, that looks terrible. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm no nonsense in that regard. So I believe in memorizing my first few lines, understanding what the crowd is, and then just kind of like feeling out the crowd and stuff. When you know you have a local guy, you know, build that up, and just certain little things and tricks that I like to do. People ask me, they're like, "Do you have a tagline?" And I go, "No," and they go, "Why not?" And my response is because I've seen too many guys going with cheesy taglines and it doesn't work. I'm not, and the thing is like, I don't know if you follow pro wrestling and all, but it's like, I'm not in this business to get myself over, like how they say in pro wrestling terms. My job is to get over the fighters, because they're the ones who have been in training camp for 2-3 months, who have bled, who are sweating, who are giving, risking their lives essentially in that field of combat. So I could care less about putting myself over. My performance will speak for itself, and my level of professionalism will speak for itself. And that's how I want people to know me, as the consummate professional, day in, day out. And that's just, I'm a very traditional way of thinking.
No, I really respect that. And no, it shows. And I love this idea that as the host, you have to show like not only professional, but kind of honoring the fighters by being your best self and everything. So I'm also very curious how we have so many international fighters, and Charles knows this is I wouldn't call it pet peeve, it's my flaw. I am horrible announcing, I should say, names. And I have a lot of international students, and I'm like, just bear with me. How do you contact, or did they give you phonetically how to say it? Do you contact the camps to know how this fighter, because they're coming from all over the world?
Yeah. If I'm on site, I try to ask the fighters, you know, hey, and like, say your name. And then if I can't communicate with them, I'm like, I'll ask their manager, their trainer, somebody, and say, what's your name? And then they'll say it. And sometimes I ask them to say it 4 or 5 times, and then I write it out phonetically. On bigger shows that I work, you know, we have phonetic spellings, but it still doesn't fall in my researcher. So I'll go on YouTube and watch old fights of theirs. And again, there's so many resources now that weren't available to us when I started. And the students have to understand, like, use all those resources, YouTube, Google, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and I'll go and I'll listen to, you know, how ring announcers introduce these foreign fighters and stuff. And even like some cool little things, like if you're in a different country, you know, learn a couple of the sayings in the native tongue and stuff, because it shows that you have appreciation for their culture. And the reason why I bring that up is I've been in Japan twice, and Tokyo is just it is a marvelous city of amazing fight fans. I did 2 Naoya Inoue fights, and it's very easy to go on Google Translate and to put in what you want to be able to say, and then literally hit the, you know, listen button, and then it will literally speak back to you. Like, the resources are unbelievable. So I'll write out how they're saying it, and I'll keep drilling it into my mind, so that, you know, I do want to be able to go and pay tribute to the local culture that I'm in. I don't believe that just because I'm from the United States that, you know, I'm the be all end all. No, I'm coming into your world. This is your culture, and I want to pay respect, even if it's something like "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." That's my way of saying, hey, look, I appreciate and respect what you guys have here.
That's right. And you know what, Professor Kidder, I'm going to take the schooling and I'm going to research my students and, you know, not allow myself to get away with it. Okay, I think this is my last ring announcer question.
Yeah.
You actually also announce the official judges score.
Yeah.
You have to do that yourself or do they? Because I'm always curious. I remember seeing I think it was in UFC 200 or 205 or one of those where it was that Woodley versus Thompson, and it was actually a draw, but you know, because it hadn't been written there, I think you know, Bruce Buffer said something else. So I'm curious, do you have to figure that out when looking at the card?
No, the commission does it, but there have been times where the commission's been wrong. And it's like, you know, sometimes I catch mistakes. Sometimes I'm like, hey, no, this is not a split decision. This is a majority decision, or this is a unanimous decision. Or, you know, there was one case a few weeks ago where the commission gave me the wrong winners because they had the wrong names. They had a different fight on the paper, and it wasn't on me. It was on the commission not being able to be cognizant enough. But, you know, it just, you know, I've caught some mistakes and stuff like that. But again, it goes back on understanding the sport. You know, you have to really understand and be, you know, when you're coming into the fight world, you have to immerse yourself in the fight world. You can't come from a different way of sports and have this arrogant or attitude like you know it all, because you don't, because of all the different things that are involved in combat sports. It is beautiful violence, as I like to say. It is its own world. It's its own unique presentation. It's different. You know, a fight guy from being a fight guy compared to a regular sports guy coming into the fight world. So that's what, you know, I definitely pay very much attention to. But yeah, I mean, the commission does it, but sometimes, you know, there's some mistakes to be had. I mean, and that's okay, because, you know, everyone's allowed to make mistakes.
Oh, of course, but it's great that you do double check and that you don't just, you know, because it's a big deal.
Oh yeah.
They've just put their lives on the line. Okay, so Charles, I'd like to bring you into the conversation about commentating, because again, I've already talked about this. I don't know how you do it. I don't, you know, I'm sitting there watching. I feel like I'm 2 minutes behind you guys sometimes because of where you are. Also knowing what to comment on and what to allow just to speak for itself. You know, so I guess, do you have a process? Do you research what the fighters might do, so that's you've already done some pre-thinking in your head?
So for me personally, oh, go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
I want to hear
let
Ray.
you go first.
All right, I'll make mine quicker. For basic background information, especially understand too, the level that I'm commentating versus Ray's is there. It's at the amateur or regional professional level. There might not be as much of a track record because their records might be, just quite frankly, a lot smaller. Whereas Ray's,
right?
In some ways, but on the other side, I'll tell you, Ray might see somebody go from, he might commentate somebody's entire career, and from their 5th fight to their 25th fight, they could be completely different fighters. So you have to break these habits and kind of like take away information that you've stored, which in itself could be a challenge. But what I'll do is I'll just go on any sort of resource I can, whether it's Tapology, SureDog, any sort of official database to see their records. And then from there, I'm looking up those fights, and I'm going to try to watch them, right? In addition to determining, do they have a background? Were they high school wrestlers, college wrestlers? Did they box while they played football? Athletic background, what got them into the sport, so on and so forth. But in terms of the fight itself, you know, sometimes I can't explain it. And Ray, I hope you have a better answer for this, but sometimes I just see something, I'm like, oh, he's about to throw the right hand. Actually, when we did our work, Jonathan Santa Maria, when he fought, oh man, I forget this gentleman's name. It was a great fight. Forgive me. But John kept like loading up his right hand. He was kind of like pumping it a little bit, and being in the game so long, probably having right hands thrown at me, I was just like, oh, he's going to throw the right hand. Right. And then boom, he fires it off. And since I've been in the game longer in training and competition, and now obviously a lot more commentary, I've kind of like picked up these small habits that people do before they do something. You'll hear Joe Rogan talk about it because he loves throwing spinning heel kicks. He was a big karate guy. That's his thing. Anytime somebody goes to throw it, you see them load up their hips. Joe is going to call that faster than anybody can because he's done it 1,000 times himself. And I think that's a luxury of the color commentary, because it's like, oh, it's habits that you've seen yourself do, as opposed to, and you get to see them on TV and kind of recognize them. But that type of, to pick that up on the play-by-play side and to set people up with it, that's pretty tough. That's like a real challenge.
Yeah.
So to be able to answer your question, Nancy, and stuff, and that was our professor, to be able to go, you know, in depth into that, what I like to do is, number one, a punch is a punch, a kick's a kick, you know, moves are moves, right? But for me, I like telling the story of the fighters more than anything, because everybody has a story. Everybody has how they got there. It's not like they're 20-0 and okay, here they are. It's like, no, they grew up. How did they grow up? What do they do in training? How did they immerse themselves in training? How do they get into that mentality? How do they do what they do? World-class prize fighters are 0.001 of the population, not 1% of the population, 0.001 of the population on human earth, because they have to put themselves in a level mentally, physically, and spiritually to compete at that extreme high level where the world is watching. There is no teammate to tag in or to try to make up for your mistakes. You're not shooting a ball through a basket. You're not throwing a football around and trying to score points. You are trying to inflict human damage or damage upon another human being. That is your goal and your mission. So I love telling the story of the fighters. And then I like seeing progressions like, okay, as Charles mentioned, like a guy that comes to mind about how he's been able to really come on in this part of his career, Jermell Charlo, the unified super welterweight champion of the world. I remember him when he was fighting back in 2014, and I was ring announcing for him and his brother, Jermall Charlo, at the Hard Rock Casino right before, on the Thursday before Mayweather, undercards and stuff, or before Mayweather fights. And they would be fighting the first or second fight on TV at like 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon in Las Vegas. And Jermell was known as just a good, pure boxer, good athlete, but good, pure boxer. He was trained with Ronnie Shields and he was undefeated. And he was doing a great job. And then he decided to change trainers and move to Derek James because he wanted to change his scenery. He just, him and Ronnie were not seeing eye to eye in some instances. They're still good friends to this day, though. And Derek made Jermell more of a power puncher. And you're starting to see all these crazy knockouts. And people are like, oh, man. And people that have just followed Jermell Charlo now are like, man, he's got heavy hands. He's got dynamite. But people fail to realize that he is an excellent, good, pure boxer. But he's just incorporated these other weapons as a part of his game. Another case in point, Manny Pacquiao. When Manny Pacquiao first burst onto the scene in the United States, he was just known as a one-handed fighter. That straight left was ridiculous. Yeah. He really started to make himself a legend when Freddie Roach incorporated the right hand to be equally as destructive as the left. And what he did to Antonio Margarito, what he did to Oscar De La Hoya, we may never see the eighth wonder of the world again. And the reason why I mentioned him in that regard is because he's an 8-division world champion. I mean, that's along the lines. I mean, that's ridiculousness. I mean, that's like Henry Armstrong. I don't even know if Henry Armstrong was able to do anything like that. Like, that's ridiculous. But you start to see these patterns. And as Charles mentioned, I have to be able to go ahead and make sure that I correct myself. And I like to pay attention to trends, and I like to pay attention to their history. And if someone I don't know, I try to find tape on them, and I try to put things together. Like if they're training with a certain trainer, like if they're training with Ronnie Shields, if they're training with a Freddie Roach, if they're training with a Herman Caicedo, a Derek James, what's their style? What's the mentality like? How are they thinking? What part of life are they in, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all these things that incorporate being a play-by-play guy.
I mean, that's the thing. So many things. I'm curious. I have two people, Charles and yourself. I have this much notes that I've written. So when you've got an undercard, a main card, how do you bring all that information? Is it? It sounds like you keep a lot of it in your head.
It's the thing is that, like, I look at it in this respect, Nancy, Professor, is that like, it's like a football team. So you build all week towards Sunday, or for us on, like, typically it's Saturday. So you build all week towards Saturday, and you're constantly, you're researching. And a lot of the guys I know now because I've been on the road all over the country with them, and I've watched them grow and evolve and develop. And I take just as much pride as someone like, we got Vito Malnicki Jr. fighting next week in Dallas. He's 18 years of age from New Jersey. He's a talented young fighter. I know his father's a promoter. And I take as much pride in calling a Vito Malnicki fight as I do Errol Spence and Danny Garcia, because I love watching these kids grow up. I love watching them take that next step in their careers, because, there's a process. And I love watching all the processes of combat sports, from when they're debuters to where they're young prospects, to where they're prospects on the verge of being a contender. So they graduate from being a prospect to a contender, to when then they're contenders for a few years. And then they graduate from being a contender to being a serious contender. And then they win an eliminator fight. And then they go on to challenging for the world title, and they have their moment. Or let's say they don't succeed, and then they come back, they go back in the contender pool, win a couple, and then challenge for another world title. And then they have their moment. Like, it's all so special to me, because it is just their plight, their journey, their sacrifice, what they've been able to do. And I give myself tests during the week. So I'll go and I'll read my notes, prepare. And then I'm like, over the course of the week, I'm testing myself. I'm like, hey, how old is Vito Malnicki Jr.? Where is he from? And if I don't know it like that, I'll go and I'll look at my notes again. So I kind of give myself pop quizzes during the week is what I do, because I need to be sharp.
Yeah.
Like it has to be bang, 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 bang. Like there's no, like you can't, like it's a timing thing. Like the thing about play-by-play, it's so much on timing, pacing, understanding. You can't be like that doesn't exist. Because if you do that and you freeze, like any prize fighter, if you freeze in the ring, you're probably going to get knocked out. And if you freeze on play-by-play, you're probably not going to be good, and you're probably not going to last. And I hate to put it that way, but it's like, you know, it's either that mentality of, in literal terms or figurative terms, kill or be killed. You're either going to do well and knock it out, or you're not. And there is no in between, because this business requires you to be on your A game at all times.
No, and reacting, as you say, and not just coming in and focused on, okay, this is what I'm going to do. That's too late. You're just already reacting. So I'm curious too, with COVID, they placed the announcers who used to be together around, and I'm so curious too about what it's like with an empty stadium and how like kind of what it really changes in the game. Does that affect the commentating? Because I think that you and Charles talked about how you prime someone up or you pass something off. Is that more difficult now that you're not together?
No, because like, you know, we have like, you have to like, it's just about listening. And then I like to, like, we're 6 feet apart, if not a little bit more. And my partners, and I think Charles can, you know, elaborate on this. When it comes to my broadcast partners, I'm big on hand signals, because I don't just like to say, Charles, Charles, Charles. It sounds redundant. And for the viewer, they're like, no kidding, we know his name already. But that's like, when you say that, that's their cue to be able to pick up whatever. So there are times where I'll like go like this, or like, I like to talk with my hands a lot. So I'll go like this, or I'll like, you know, lay out, or I'll be wrapping up my thought and I'll like kind of pause. And then I'm like, and then I'll let them know like, all right, here you go. You know what I mean? Or jump in on the replay, like don't wait for me and stuff. So it's a big timing thing. A play-by-play guy is like a quarterback, but he's also like a conductor of a great orchestra. You got to be able to like incorporate everybody. And for me, people are not tuning in to listen to me. They're tuning in to listen to the expertise of the analyst and watch the fighters do what they do. My job is for the casual viewer that's flipping around, the casual and the hardcores, because you got to appease the hardcores because they're the lifeblood of the sport. But also when I get to casuals, I need to be able to tell the story, but then I also have to tell the significance of why this fight matters. So it's that balancing act, and then incorporating my analyst in the same token and make sure that my producer and I are getting to the elements that we want to be able to get to over the course of the show, and not making it seem like I am taking you through a TV show. It's like you're watching entertainment, and it is effortless. That's how I want to make every single show look, sound, and feel.
And also now with COVID, or Charles.
So just to add to that, I want to actually tell you a little story specifically about the way Ray conducts, which actually I think that's a tremendous way to describe it. So when I did my first show, Juliana was still relatively green, and I was obviously, you know, fresh. But Ray had been doing it for a little while. So one thing he did was, in addition to saying our names when it was kind of our cue to speak, he would tap us. He would literally tap us, right? Like I think I had a bruised shoulder because he kept going, right? You know, but it was so helpful because just like he had said a moment ago, for play-by-play, it's all about timing. You don't want those, like, it can't be awkward, you know, like awkward silences and stuff. That cannot ever happen during a broadcast. It always is one direct executive action to the next. And that action being, you know, conversation and something. You don't want to have filler, right? There's no, no likes, no no, right? I call myself as I did it, but you got to you cut all that out, and it's just so fluid. And I actually was really lucky because you can't mess up the tap. And when he tapped, I knew it was my turn to go, and it prevented him from saying, like you said, Charles, 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 Charles. And I went and I did that for my first time doing play-by-play. I worked with Sadiq Yusuf and Carl Robertson, and it was their first time doing color commentary. Now, obviously, they were both in the UFC, so I was working with more than, unfortunately, you had at the time. But rather than keep saying Carl and Sadiq, I would just tap them on the shoulder, and they would go and they would pick right up. And it really eliminated any sort of filler time or any like awkward silences. It just made the timing so fluid. And that, I think, goes the longest way on a broadcast, in addition to obviously being able to tell the story. But those mechanics, I mean, they're crucial. They're truly crucial.
It's amazing because as the viewer, as I'm not in the cage ever or as a commentator, I have no idea this is going on. I'm enjoying it, and this is why you can see I'm very curious.
Yeah.
With COVID.
But that's the point. See, that's the point, is that we don't want you to know. Like, I'm telling you this because we don't want the viewer to know, because we want you guys to enjoy what you're watching in the most effortless way possible, especially the world that we're living in right now. When you come and you watch our shows, I want you to take your mind off of everything going on in the world, financially, health-wise, economically, doesn't matter. You are coming to be entertained and informed about these great fighters. And that's what we want you to do, to have as relaxing and enjoy and be loud and vocal and as passionate as you want to be. That's the goal, is to take your mind off of life.
No, and I appreciate it, because I also think in COVID that the commentator's taken on the role. Because I don't know, do you have a commentator cam with Premier?
We don't. No, we
Oh,
don't.
because we don't have the reaction of the crowd. And so
Yeah.
I'm just loving the commentator cam, because it's the, that feeling, and you just, because you can't be there. So tell them at PBC that I would like the race.
Yeah.
I want to see your face. But we're also hearing you much more often. And, and I guess the fighters, have you noticed that they might be hearing you?
Yeah. And it's like, I feel bad, because it's like, I like to tell the story as honest as possible, and I never down a fighter. That's not my thing. But when a fighter, like, there are a lot of times where I know both fighters, and if fighter A is doing well against fighter B and hurting him and looking great, I can't, even though I know both guys, I can't shy away from how good fighter A is looking. And it's like, yeah, I know these people, and I know that all these guys have feelings, but I have to call it objectively and as down the middle as possible. And that's what I try to do. So a lot of times, some of the guys can hear and stuff like that. And, the one thing I'll tell you, Professor, and Charles as well, is that it's not the same without fans. For people that say that, oh, I like it without fans and this and that. Well, you know what? You're crazy and you're wrong. And I'll tell you why you're wrong, because the fans are the reason why I have a job. The fans are the reason why fighters are able to make millions of dollars. The fans are the reason why combat sports exist. There would be no promoters, no matchmakers without the fans. I love fight fans, whether it be good critiques or bad critiques. The bottom line is that they're watching and they're passionate enough to give their opinion. There is nothing greater on God's green earth than a big prize fight in one of the major cities of the world, and you feel that moment right before the pageantry of what a prize fight is all about, either before the anthems or the walkout, and that fighter takes that long walk, and the fighters are there, and you feel the electricity in the air. I mean, I remember calling Wilder Fury #2 and feeling that electricity and that energy and that passion, and it was Las Vegas. It just makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And that's why I've done it. I've been fortunate, knock on wood, to do it so many times. And you know what? It never gets old. It is such a thrill. It is a high on life. And it takes me a few hours after the fight, not a few hours, honestly, like 4 or 5, to come down off of that high, because you are so fortunate to be in that environment and feel that energy and that electricity and watch something truly special develop in front of your eyes, and you get to call that moment. That is ridiculous.
It is. No, it's almost, you also get to be a part of something, this almost self-transcendent moment where you are part of the crowd and part of the fight. I can't imagine what that feels like, to be there. That happened, that Wilder 2, Fury 2, that was right before COVID, right? Was that end of February?
Yep, February 22nd.
Oh my God, can you imagine that occurring without fans and without the pageantry of that event? And I think I'm curious how it's affecting the fighters too, because there is something about when you win, you're in front of your family, friends. It's like this moment. And Charles, you've been in a fight as well as calling them. It's something I think that is part of the whole experience. So if you're I wonder if you're in this vacuum where you're not getting that, I guess you can go and check your Instagram
Yeah.
something. You just wonder how that affects them, because you're right, prize fighting, which has been around for a long time, even though it only takes a special individual to do it. It's the fans have always been part of it.
Nancy, I tell you this, Professor, in the sense that, like, I would say that there has been no drop off from the fighters' performance. And that's why I have that much more respect and admiration for them. Watching Sean Porter go out and, he's used to fight in front of thousands of people, and fighters that have done that and do it without fans, but yet their level hasn't dropped. They've gotten better. That's just a testament to how great and how special they are. And again, I use the word responsibility. It puts more responsibility on us to make sure that we get across the proper emotions to where the audience can put it in the right context, to where it resonates in the fashion that it's supposed to be absorbed in.
Yes. So true. You're responsible for a lot.
No, we certainly are. But you know what? It's like, I love it because I love having that responsibility, because I know that I take it with such a great deal of respect. And it's kind of like the old TMA mentality, the traditional martial arts mentality, is that you look up to your senseis and stuff like that. I look at those before me as being like my senseis, and you bet your ass that I'm not going to mess up and I'm not going to take it. I'm going to work just as hard on every single fight as the last.
I can tell. And by the way, it's Nancy. When you say professor,
Okay.
I'm kind of like,
sorry.
And do I? No. But no, I also appreciate it. The story, because that's where I come in. I fell in love with not only like nonfiction, where like Gay Talese, AJ Liebling, George Plimpton, they would actually convey the human part of these fighters. There's a great essay by Gay Talese on Floyd Patterson called The Loser. And it's amazing, because we always kind of think of fighters as in their prime being a winner. But it really showed how, as a loser, you can have this beauty, because you have to carry on. I mean, two people go in the ring, there's a winner and there's a loser. And, that those are the people who are losing in front of their family, or losing. That takes so much strength to get through that day and to carry on. So as much as obviously winning is a moment that will carry on in your life. So yes, you're conveying this and throwing to a commercial or giving some ads.
Yeah, you're right.
So I appreciate, and I really want people to know what the backbone of the fighting experience is people like yourself and Charles doing these kinds of skills. And you know what, Ray, you kind of notice when it's not done well. It's I'll put on like a promotion or two, and I think I've told Charles about some of them I've seen, and it's just like they're not focused, they're not watching the fight, and they are just kind of forgetting about that emotion and what's going on. And so it's kind of like bad writing. You know it when you see it, and that's why we should just realize that we have you, and that you take this so seriously, and have so much respect for this art form. Do we have time? It's 5:06. I know I don't want to take too much, but I really
I got another 15 minutes and stuff. That's not a problem. I got another 15. As long as I'm out of here by 20, that'd be great.
Of course. No, and I don't want any of the promotions coming after me, because I gotten you in trouble or anything.
No worries. You're all good. I just got interviewed Derek James at the bottom of the hour. That's all.
Oh my God. Amazing. So, okay. Well, can we talk about so that fight's going on? You have a fight this?
Yeah. December 5.
Oh, December 5. Yes. And
yep.
Wow. Errol Spence Jr. versus Daniel Garcia. I'm so excited about this. This is Spence, his first time back.
Yeah, from the car accident.
Yes. And then Garcia, and he was the former champion.
He was former unified super lightweight champion of the world. He had a vacant belt at 147 that he defeated Robert Guerrero in January of 16 at Staples Center, but he's looking for that significant victory at 147, and he might be able to find it on December 5. We'll find out.
No, I mean, there's so much. I really find this one of the most competitive of this year. And so how's it going? What are you doing to prepare for?
I mean,
for this?
I've been so fortunate, Nancy. Like, I'm like a kid in a candy store right now. The reason why I tell you this is because last week I was in, my schedule's been all over the place, right? So last week I went on Thursday, I hosted the Errol Spence workout in Dallas, and I hosted that on YouTube and stuff on the PBC Unbox YouTube page. So I got an opportunity to watch Errol work out, talk with him and his entire team. I just got back I went on Monday to watch Danny Garcia train and watch him do his thing. And I was around his team and everything else. I love being around these guys. I mean, number one, like I admire both of them, but I love being around prize fighters because, again, I love where they have to put themselves physically, but more so where their mental side is at. As we are only we've been, 10 days away? We're about 10 days away from the fight. And it's like, I like to see where they are physically. What's that look in the eye? What's their demeanor like? And as you get involved in this business, and Charles can probably attest to this as well, is that I get an opportunity to see guys, if they're focused, if they're not. I can tell these things because it's a feel thing. I've been around them enough. I understand, and I can really gauge that. But I watched Errol Spence training. He looks in unbelievable shape. Like, I mean, he's whacking the bag and just hitting. You hear that pop, and his mentality is like he's not looking past Danny Garcia, but he wants to look through him because he wants to make a statement and pound him out. For Danny Garcia, Danny came in before we started the workout, and he started working out even before the workout actually hit the air. And I saw a sense of urgency. I saw this sense of, he was enthusiastic. It wasn't like he was going through the motions of training camp. He was lively, more lively than usual. His dad has always been a personality and is a character, but his dad is one that, they have respect for Spence, but they understand that they have to go ahead and do what they do. And I mean, I think these are just two great guys going at it. I fly out to Dallas on Tuesday. I'll be doing the press conference, hosting the press conference for FS1 at the desk on Wednesday, and then I'll be hosting the undercard press conference on Thursday. Friday's the weigh-in, Saturday's the fight. So I'm going to enjoy Thanksgiving over the next few days to rest, and then come, I'll enjoy some football Sunday with my brother and maybe a friend of his, but after Sunday is over, like my mind's already on kind of the fight and getting in, like fighters, like I want to make sure I peak at the right time. But after Sunday is over, if it wasn't for Thanksgiving, I'd probably be in super fight mode already. Yeah. But because it's Thanksgiving, I'm like, let me be a normal human being and let me put work on the back burner a little bit. But you bet yourself that I am already preparing and ready and understanding what outfits I'm going to wear and how I'm going to wear them and my travel itinerary and getting everything together to where I am in peak possible form for that fight week, because it's going to be electric at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. And I'm not saying that because I work for the promotion, because I really mean it. And when you as a commentator get that opportunity to call a big prize fight like this, every prize fight is so significant. I mean, I don't know if you remember, you probably don't, but the late great Gorilla Monsoon, who used to be a commentator for the WWF, one of the things that he would always say when I was watching pro wrestling as a kid is history will be made tonight. And that phrase always stood with me, because the thing is that when something special happens and these two guys go to war on December 5, 2020, as a fight fan, I remember where I was, much like you did when Tyson lost to Buster Douglas. I remember where I was sitting, who I was sitting with when Julio Cesar Chavez defeated Hector Camacho. I remember where I was when Julio Cesar Chavez defeated Greg Halgan in February of 1993 in front of the largest crowd ever to witness a boxing match, a prize fight at Estadio Azteca. I remember those moments. Those are not just moments in fight history. Those are moments in my life. To be able to call them, man, let's go.
No, and for us, it's kind of like we have sounds kind of weird, but we have a friend because we follow you, and when I see, oh, Ray's calling, it's kind of like we have a connection to the fight because we follow you, and so I'm glad that I'm so glad you're going to be calling this fight, and I'm so excited because I really don't know who's going to win, and I know you probably don't make predictions because you're
I
playing.
don't know. Yeah. I mean, but the way I look at it is this. I say that I think it's a closer fight than what the odds makers have it. I always point to the odds makers because that's how they have the fight, and typically that's where the public kind of sides where how the fight is. So that's how I bring it up, because I don't have a favorite either way. I just don't, and I cannot. But I like both guys. I think both guys are great representations for the sport of boxing. I think they both have great stories. They're both unique individuals. They both have great trainers. And AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, if you've ever been, that is a palace. That is an absolute palace. And Jerry Jones, like, I'm a diehard Chicago Bears fan, but I'm jealous. I wish that was the home of the Bears because of how special and immaculate that place is. Another thing that I'll tell you, Nancy, is that when it comes to buildings, I'm very aware of the history in the buildings that we go to. For me, working at Staples Center, Barclays Center, working at AT&T Stadium, working at Dignity Health Sports Park, what used to be StubHub Center, the War Grounds in Southern California, working the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, that rich tradition, working the Mandalay Bay Event Center. There's certain buildings all over the world. When I worked Saitama Super Arena for Inoue Donaire, and that place was sold out because I used to watch the old Pride fights from Saitama Super Arena when I was 16, 17 years old, and be able to work that building on the biggest night in Japanese boxing history the past 5 years was significant. So understanding that you are, much like people say when they go to football stadiums, like hallowed grounds, that's what I know and I take away from prize fights. Set aside the fighters, because the fighters are significant and special all to itself, but being on these hallowed grounds and knowing that Mike Tyson and Chavez and Holyfield made that walk at the MGM Grand, Mayweather, Pacquiao, et cetera, and to be at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, with limited fans in attendance, due to COVID guidelines and stuff like that. But that place is going to rock, and I can't wait for that moment.
I love that. I also feel like the history kind of stays in a place. And I completely agree. Charles, it looks like you have something to add.
Yeah. So just before that, Nancy, when you were saying like when you recognize somebody and you kind of like, oh, I know him, and he's on,
Oh,
So
totally.
Ray, I was watching the Notorious documentary. I don't know if you remember this. Remember I texted
Oh,
you?
yeah, I remember you told me. Yeah.
So Nancy, then I'll tell you, right? So I'm watching the Notorious documentary with Grace, actually. And at the very end, they go into the May Mac fight, right? And in that little portion that they do, there's a very clear representation of Ray announcing and welcoming Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. And I want to ask a question, Nancy, if that's all right. Because,
yeah.
bro, I don't think I've ever asked you this. How did that come about? What was that like being there for that? I mean, you're in some iconic photos that Esther Lynn took, who, by the way, Nancy's good friends with. So, I mean,
Esther's amazing. I've known Esther forever.
Okay. I mean, she's tremendous. The best. Also so nice. But she's been in a few writing and fighting classes and stuff. And, I just get a kick out of her. But nevertheless, you're in a bunch of these picks, man. And I'm just blown away by like how big that moment must have been.
That came about because, God rest his soul, one of my late bosses that used to work for Premier Boxing Champions, Skip Davis, who handled operations for PBC. When that fight was being talked about and it was like, this might be a go, I'm like, whoa, I'm like, hey, if they do anything, I'm like, I'd like to be a part of it. He goes, okay, stay tuned, fine, we'll see what's going on. And then my name started getting bandied around. I'm like, hey, they're like, well, we're going to do a press tour. I'm like, what? I'm like, hey, whatever you guys need, I'm ready. I'm like, I'm always ready. And they go, it looks good. I'm like, oh man, it looks good. This is probably late June, middle of June. The tour was like second week of July. And then I was told, they're like, you're in. And I'm like, okay. They're like, you're going to be getting a call in, a day or two, whatever. So this is like probably right around July 4th weekend. And I'm like, man, I haven't gotten a call. And like, I only told my parents, and they were like, relax, stay calm, you're good. I'm like, no, I'm like, this is the biggest opportunity of my life. Like, I don't want it to go away. And then, one of the people from Swanson Communications, one of the PR companies for PBC, they called me on July 4th, right after a Cubs game. Cause I used to, I'm a White Sox fan, but I go into Wrigley Field during the holiday, and they're like, hey, you should be getting a call for the next few days. This is on a Wednesday. I didn't get the call from Mayweather Promotions because they knew I was already locked in, but they didn't call me officially. But, I'm nervous as hell about it, right? So they called me on that Saturday before, and they're like, hey, your flight's being booked. You're coming on Monday to LA and stuff. I'm like, thank God. Oh, God, because the tour is going to start that Tuesday. And I was like, I got my flight. And they're like, yeah, you're good. We got your flight booked. We're going to send it out to you and stuff like that. So I didn't make the announcement that I was doing this thing until literally I was working out in the gym the Tuesday morning before the tour. And I was in my room and I was working out and I made that tour. I'm like, oh God, by the way, guys, like I'm hosting this tour and it starts today. And people are like, what are you talking about? But it's like when something's too good to be true, whatever, like, and it's that big of a moment, like wait until all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed to make the announcement because you don't want to, look like an idiot or be disappointed and stuff. But that was a significant moment, and 4 cities in 4 days and being a part of those guys. And then I'll give you one more story before I got to like really get out of here. We're in Brooklyn. We're in Brooklyn the night before the last stop. So we did, we did LA, Toronto, and Brooklyn. A couple hours before Brooklyn starts, and we're getting ready to start the Brooklyn presser. I asked, I'm like, who's hosting London's presser tomorrow? Because both Conor and Floyd were going to be in a boxing ring for the first time. And then Leonard Ellerby goes, you are, man. He goes, I got you hosting it. I'm like, me? And he goes, yeah. And I go, I'm ready. Cause you bet your ass in, pardon me cursing, but like you bet yourself I was ready to go. We land off of the private jet. So I flew like on the PJ for like from LA all the way through, et cetera, et cetera. So that was pretty ridiculous. But we're in the car and it's myself, it's Leonard Ellerby, Nicole Craig from Mayweather Promotions and somebody else. And Leonard goes, Ray, you got this today, right? He goes, you're hosting, you got this, right? And I'm like, yeah, Leonard, I'm all good. He goes, good. He goes, just want to make sure he goes, I just didn't want to go talking a lot, whatever. He goes, I just want to make sure you got this. I'm like, oh, I'm ready to rock, man. And so a couple hours before we're getting ready to start, I had an FS1 show the following night. We had an FS1 show and a Fox show the night after. So I flew from London to New York. So I had to do, before I even prepared for the presser, I had to do fighter meetings on the phone for the FS1 show that I was calling. So I'm like in a mall in London, on the phone asking questions to 4 fighters to be able to get my information that I need for the next night. And then I had lunch and then I kept prepping for the press conference and stuff. And then away we went. And we did the London press conference and stuff. 11,500 people. Half of them were from Ireland coming over to see Conor. It was wicked.
I remember I watched it all, like so many Americans, fight professors and just everybody watched it live on YouTube. And it was for me, it was being able to witness because I've seen, the footage from Ali Liston 1 or Cassius Clay Liston. And then, I've watched the movie, the documentary When We Were Kings. And so to be able to watch the actual presser and see, and you knew it was going to be theatric. And
exactly.
Like they did not disappoint. And, you got to look back on that because they sold that fight and it was so well done because I don't know, for me, I couldn't wait for that fight because of all the buildup. And, we found storylines we didn't even know about during that.
Yeah.
So
very, very much so. And what I'll say about them is that Mayweather, McGregor, those guys are both worth a gajillion dollars, but you know what? They work just as hard as when they started. Floyd says, hard work, dedication. That's the absolute truth. That guy answered every question and promoted the hell out of a fight. So the younger generation needs to understand if Floyd at that time had like $700 million in the bank, if he is still promoting his brains off, then guess what? You have no excuse. You have to bring your best foot forward because if he's willing to work hard 120% and Conor's willing to work hard 120%, Conor brought it all the time. Floyd brought it every single night. They could have taken a couple nights off or not been as enthusiastic or passionate, but they brought him. That's what separates them from everybody else. And if you want to get to their level, you got to work just as hard as they do at their level.
No, so much of the fight happens outside the ring.
That's so true.
Indeed. Ray, I know you have to go. This has been such a pleasure. I've learned so much. I appreciate it, from, talking about how the story is important to how you prepare, and how you got started and who your mentors and who you aspire to be. But, I'm just so thankful that my students get to watch this and learn, and don't say no. Right?
Yeah, don't say no. As long as it doesn't put you in physical harm, don't say no.
Going to a country that the State Department says is a violation.
Exactly. And I'd love to be able to come back on because, I mean, whatever if you guys have more questions and stuff, I mean, I can talk about this business for days because I love it. I eat it. I breathe it. And it is honestly the greatest job in the world because I'm around the greatest fighters in the world. And I work with some of the greatest people in the world because people that work in the fight business, Charles and I connected through this business and we'll be friends till the day I die. So that's the truth.
I love it.
My man.
And Charles, can you when is Cowboy Fight Series going to come back?
Yeah, so to make it as quick as possible, right now, I don't think for a lot of promotions that aren't at the level of maybe PBC or the UFC or something like that, they're going to be on hold because they're all dependent on their ticket sales. So no news for Cowboy Fight Series or anything like that. And to be honest with you, I don't think we'll have any news for any regional or local promotions for quite some time. But I can tell you one thing, Ray's infectious enthusiasm is just it's so motivating, man, just hearing that. And I mean, we talk, but still, even just hearing you kind of talk about it and teach the class that stuff, it's really terrific, and all I could say is good things happen to good people. And I'm real happy to see your success and go get to work, bro. Don't let me hold you back.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. You guys have a great one and happy Thanksgiving to you and your families and to everyone, and just stay safe and, remain cautious.
Man, tell Miguel I said hello.
Will do. Take care, guys.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you, Charles.
Nancy, thank you. He's terrific, isn't he?
It was so great. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Anybody else, you let me know. If I know him, I'll send him your way.
Done. Likewise. All right.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Take care. Hope to see you next week.
Yeah, I'll be on.